I sold my company for $30 million. I decided to celebrate with my daughter and her husband at the most expensive restaurant in the city. But when I got up to take a call, the waiter whispered to me, "I think your daughter put something in your drink." I went back to the table, pretending nothing happened. And 10 minutes later, before we continue, subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The afternoon light filtered through the palm trees lining my driveway and the coral rooftops, drawing gold stripes across the windshield. I parked the Mercedes, my briefcase sitting on the passenger seat like a faithful companion. 30 millions de dollars. That number echoed in my chest, a confirmation of 40 years spent building something from nothing. My company, my life's work, signed away that morning, transformed into security for my remaining years. I parked and grabbed the briefcase. The leather was warm from the sun. The mansion stood before me, gleaming white stucco, bought 5 years ago so Sarah and Brian could live comfortably while they got established. My daughter deserved everything I could give her. That's what fathers do. "Sarah, Brian," I called out from the foyer. My voice echoed on the marble floor. Silence at first. Then I heard footsteps upstairs, muffled voices. I moved to the foot of the stairs, my hand on the banister, ready to go up and share the news. "It has to be tonight." Brian's voice cut through the silence. "Sharp." I froze. 1 foot on the bottom step. What if he notices? Sarah's voice, tense, weak. "He won't notice. He trusts you." That's exactly the point. My grip tightened on the railing. Suddenly, the briefcase felt heavy. I stepped back, my shoe whispering against the marble, and went to the kitchen. What plan? Why tonight? The questions circled like vultures, but I pushed them down, forcing my breathing to calm. I made coffee. My hands went through the familiar motions while my mind raced. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled. I tapped my phone 3 times, my fingers hovering over my lawyer's contact. But I didn't hit call. Not yet. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe paranoia comes with sudden wealth. Everyone warned me. 20 minutes dragged by before footsteps sounded on the stairs. I put on a happy face and turned to greet them. Sarah appeared first, Brian's hand resting on the small of her back. Possessive. My daughter was wearing too much makeup for a quiet afternoon at home. Brian's smile flashed, white and rehearsed. I closed the deal. I set my coffee mug down carefully. 30 million. Can you believe it? Sarah's smile stretched just a little too long. "That's wonderful, Dad." Her emphasis landed on the wrong syllable. I raised this woman. I knew her rhythm like the back of my hand. This wasn't wonder. It was theater. "Congratulations, sire." Brian stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Sir." Not Dad, even though he'd called me Dad for 5 years. "You must be thrilled. I thought we'd celebrate." I shook his hand, counting the seconds until he let go. Together, as a family. Sarah's fingers found her wedding ring, twisting it, over and over. "Of course. We're so proud of you." The words sounded hollow, like coins dropping in an empty well. I watched her eyes dart to Brian, looking for permission or instruction. I couldn't tell which. "Azure Coast," I said, testing them. 8 o'clock. My treat. Brian's expression shifted. Something predatory flickered behind his polished look. Generous as always. That word, generous. It landed wrong, with a meaning I couldn't grasp. Resentment? Anticipation? "You don't have to," Sarah started. "He wants to, honey." Brian cut her off with surgical precision. "Let him celebrate." I watched them both. How they positioned themselves between me and the stairs. How their eyes met in silent conversation. The air felt wrong, like the pressure drop before a storm. "I want my daughter there. And you too, Brian." I said the words slowly, watching. Neither of them flinched. 2 hours until dinner. I went upstairs to get ready, passing Sarah's closed bedroom door. Voices, muffled but urgent. I moved closer, shame burning in my chest as I strained to hear. What if someone sees us? Zara, frightened. No one will notice. Everyone will just think he's had too much wine. My blood ran cold. I can't believe we're... Do you want to keep living here? Brian's voice hardened. Do you want the money? Then stop hesitating. Silence. Then Sarah. Barely a whisper. Okay. Okay. Tonight. I pulled back from the door, my reflection caught in the hallway mirror. 63 years old. A confident face. A fool's eyes. How long had I been blind? I went to my room, locked the door, and stood in the middle of the expensive emptiness. My father's old cufflinks waited in their velvet case. I fastened them with trembling fingers. Armor for a battle that didn't have a name yet. In the bathroom, I looked in the mirror again and made a decision. I photographed my water glass, my bottle of cologne, my untouched bourbon, paranoid actions that would turn out to be foresight. My phone felt heavier than the briefcase. Check the will. Call the lawyer tomorrow. I whispered the words aloud, making them real. When I walked out, dressed in my best suit, I found them waiting by the door. We walked to the car in a deafening silence. I drove my Mercedes, my car, my control. At least for now. Sarah sat in the passenger seat. Brian settled in behind me, his hand resting on my headrest, fingers almost brushing my shoulder. Marking territory. I watched them in the rearview mirror more than I watched the road. Brian met my eyes once. He smiled. It wasn't friendly. I knew it. Beautiful night, I said, breaking the toxic silence. Perfect for a celebration, Brian replied. Sarah shifted in her seat. Dad, what are your plans? For the money. I gripped the wheel. Plans? I just wondered if you'd thought about the future, your will, things like that. Every muscle in my body tensed. We were still 5 minutes from the restaurant, and she was already talking about my death. Funny you should mention that. I kept my voice calm. We pulled into the Azure Coast Circular Drive. The valet, Marcus, approached to his usual professional warmth. Good evening, Mr. Lane. A pleasure. Good to be here, Marcus. I handed him the keys, grateful for a familiar face, someone who knew me as more than just a target. Behind me, Brian leaned towards Sarah, his lips barely moving. Remember what we talked about? I turned sharply. What was that, Brian? His recovery was too smooth, too rehearsed. Just reminding Sarah how lucky we are to have you. The words should have sounded grateful. Instead, they sounded like an obituary read too soon. We walked into the restaurant. I followed my daughter and son-in-law, and what I was about to do. I took out my phone again. This time I photographed the table through the glass. The angle captured all 3 glasses, documenting their positions. Evidence, though I hadn't decided what for. Yet, I put the phone away. My reflection stared back from the glass door. A 63-year-old man, in an expensive suit. A successful businessman. A devoted father. That man died tonight. What walked back into that restaurant would be something colder, harder, the city lights just starting to glitter on the dark water. Our table. Right by the glass. A spectacular view. Of course, only the best for the man they plan to destroy tonight. I pulled out Sarah's chair. An old habit, hard to break. She sat down without meeting my eyes. Brian took the seat facing the room, positioning himself to watch everything and everyone. I took the remaining chair, the one against the wall, which suited me fine. I wanted to watch, too. A waiter appeared, leaving menus, reciting specials I didn't hear. My focus snapped to the table setting. Sarah to my left, Brian across from me. My wine glass, well within her reach. Wine, Brian suggested, signaling the sommelier. Of course. I kept my voice light, curious to see how far they would take this performance. The sommelier arrived. Brian ordered a Bordeaux that cost $300 a bottle. My money. His taste. I nodded, watching Sarah's fingers dance on the tablecloth, drawing invisible shapes. Minutes later, another waiter approached, older, maybe mid-40s, with watchful eyes. His name tag read Kevin. He poured the wine with practiced precision, filling each glass to the proper level. The deep red liquid caught the candlelight. I watched the position of each glass, memorizing. A toast? Brian raised his glass. The performance continuing. To new chapters, Sarah offered, her voice tight. To family, I countered. I saw them both freeze for just a second. Before they reacted, cheers. Crystal chimed against crystal. I raised the glass to my lips. But I didn't drink. I set it down just as my phone vibrated in my pocket. Perfect timing. Or maybe an intervention. Excuse me. I pulled out the phone, looked at the screen. My accountant. I should take this. Details on the deal. Sarah's relief was visible, her shoulders dropping slightly. Of course, Brian nodded. Magnanimous. Business never stops. I stood, phone to my ear, and walked toward the terrace doors. Through the glass, I could still see our table. I could watch their movements. The accountant's voice droned in my ear. Confirmation numbers, transfer dates, paperwork to review tomorrow. But my eyes stayed fixed on my daughter and the man who controlled her. There were only two other couples on the terrace, far enough away for privacy. The cool October breeze hit my face. I turned slightly, keeping visual contact with our table through the glass doors. That's when I saw it. Sarah leaned forward, her hand moving toward my wine glass. Brian's posture changed. He straightened up, raising his hand to Kevin, who was passing by, calling him over. Bread, water, some manufactured need, a distraction tactic. Kevin changed course, following Brian's signal. But Kevin's position gave him a clear view of the table. I saw his eyes drop. I saw his expression shift from professional courtesy to alarm. Sarah pulled her hand back. Fast. Something moved between her fingers, so quick, so practiced. The wine glass sat innocently where I had left it. But even from the terrace, I could see the liquid had changed. Darker, denser. My accountant asked me a question. I gave an automatic answer. My world was rearranging itself around this confirmed betrayal. Kevin finished with Brian, moved away, but his eyes kept darting back to my glass. His movements became uncertain, his professional mask cracking. I watched him debate duty versus conscience. After 3 minutes, that felt like hours. Conscience won. I hung up just as Kevin approached the terrace door. He pushed through, looking for me, and found me by the railing. Mr. Lane? His voice was nervous. Kevin? I read his name tag again, memorizing it. Is something wrong with the service? He glanced back into the dining room, toward our table. Sarah and Brian were talking, appearing calm, but I saw the tension in their backs, waiting for me to return. Sir, Kevin twisted the bar towel in his hands. I could lose my job for this, but I saw your daughter put something in your wine glass while you were on the phone. A clear liquid from a small bottle. Those words should have shocked me. Instead, they confirmed everything. Are you sure? I asked, even though I had seen it myself. I needed to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. Positive, sir. The glass on your left. The one you haven't touched. I've worked here 6 years. I've never seen anything like it. But I saw it clearly. His eyes pleaded with me to believe him. To act. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a folded $100 bill and gave it to him. Thank you, Kevin. You may have just saved my life. His fingers closed on the money by reflex. What are you going to do? Nothing that involves you. I promise. Go back to work. Forget this conversation. He nodded, relief and worry warring on his face. Then he disappeared back into the dining room. I stood on the terrace, the cold air sharpening my thoughts, watching through the glass as Sarah checked her phone, as Brian's hand rested on the table, claiming space, claiming control, claiming what he believed would soon be his. My daughter, my own daughter, 36 years ago. I held her minutes after she was born. I promised her everything. I kept every promise I ever made. And tonight, she tried to poison me. No, she did poison me. The glass waited on the table, an innocent crystal vessel holding death. The question wasn't if I should confront them. It was how I would make them understand exactly what they had done, and what I was about to do. I took out my phone again. This time I photographed the table through the glass. The angle captured all three glasses, documenting their positions. Evidence, though I hadn't decided what for. Yet, I put the phone away. My reflection stared back from the glass door. A 63-year-old man, in an expensive suit. A successful businessman. A devoted father. That man died tonight. What walked back into that restaurant would be something colder, harder, something built to survive territory I never imagined I'd have to navigate. I pushed the doors open. The noise of the dining room returned. Conversations, laughter, the clinking of silver, the everyday sounds of people who believe their families love them. 20 feet separated me from our table, from my daughter, from my poisoned wine. Every step was calculated, measuring, preparing. When I reached my chair, my face showed only a mild apology for the long call. I sat down. I smiled at them both, like a man who hadn't just witnessed his own murder plot. Sorry about that. I set the menu down. I tapped my wine glass lightly, a brush of fingers against the stem. Deal issues, all sorted out now. Sarah let out a breath. Brian's smile widened. Shall we order? I asked. I'm starving. And I was. Not for food, but for justice, for revenge, to see them drink the poison they had prepared for me. Excuse me. I placed my napkin on my lap, an easy, practiced motion. Everything all right? Brian asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. Better than all right. The wire transfer went through. It's official. I lifted my wine glass, brought it close enough to smell the aroma, then set it down, untouched. Let's order first. I want to savor this moment properly. Sarah's fingers traced the stem of her own glass, the clean glass. Her smile looked borrowed from a stranger. That's great, Dad. To family, I said, raising my glass in a mock toast, but not drinking. They raised theirs, Crystal chimed. I watched them drink, while mine stayed full. Sarah's eyes kept flicking to my glass, a question forming behind her forced composure. Why wasn't I drinking? I looked at the menu, pretending to consider. The Chilean sea bass sounds perfect. Brian, what are you having? Filet. Rare. His choice of words. Aggressive. Telling. I'm not very hungry. Sarah mumbled. You should eat, I said. It's an important night. I stressed the last two words, watching her flinch. She knew it was important. She just didn't know how important. The breadbasket arrived. I tore off a piece, buttering it in slow, deliberate motions. Time stretched. They waited for me to drink. I waited for my chance. Brian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Then at Sarah, a silent communication. The strain of their patience was almost visible. Excuse me, be right back, I said, standing up. I'll go too. Sarah jumped to her feet, almost desperate. We walked off in opposite directions toward the restrooms. I counted to 10, then looked back at our table. Brian was looking down at his phone, thumbs moving fast across the screen. Completely absorbed. 3 seconds. That's all I needed. I walked back to the table, reached out, and switched the glasses. My poison glass went to her spot. Her clean glass came to mine. I used my napkin to wipe the condensation, leaving everything looking untouched. Brian started to look up. I was already looking at the menu, my hand nowhere near the wine. Forget something? He asked, just checking if we ordered the appetizer. We're fine. I walked away, back toward the restrooms, before he could register anything strange. When I returned, Sarah was already seated, her face flushed, anxiety radiating from her stiff posture. I eased back into my chair, picked up my menu, raising my glass in a mock toast, but not drinking. They raised theirs, Crystal chimed. I watched them drink, while mine stayed full. Sarah's eyes kept flicking to my glass, a question forming behind her forced composure. Why wasn't I drinking? I looked at the menu, pretending to consider. The Chilean sea bass sounds perfect. Brian, what are you having? Filet. Rare. His choice of words. Aggressive. Telling. I'm not very hungry, Sarah mumbled. You should eat, I said, with cold, absolute clarity. Brian was talking about investment opportunities, his voice a low drone. 2 minutes passed. 3, 4. Sarah's expression changed. Confusion flickered across her face. She blinked rapidly, shaking her head slightly, as if to clear a fog. I feel, she said, her hand going to her throat. Weird. Honey, Brian said, noticing her pale face. She gripped the edge of the table, her breathing shallow and fast. I can't breathe right. Other diners turned, murmurs of concern spreading from our table. What's happening? She tried to stand, stumbled, and collapsed backward. Brian screamed, Somebody call an ambulance! I remained perfectly still. When her eyes, panicked, met mine, I spoke. My voice was cold. I switched the glasses, Sarah. The silence stretched. Terror, understanding, betrayal reflected back at me in her wide eyes. What did you put in my wine? Every word was measured, deliberate. What are you talking about? Brian's face twisted from confusion to rage to disbelief. I didn't look at him, only at her. Ask your wife what she meant to put in my glass. Sarah was sobbing, a choked sound. It was just to help you relax, to get you in a good mood for the papers. Brian's expression changed. The full weight of the failure, catastrophic, total, hit his eyes. Kevin appeared, phone already to his ear, calling 911. The manager rushed over, trying to maintain discretion as chaos erupted at table 12. Minutes later, paramedics rushed in, equipment rattling. They surrounded Sarah, taking vitals, firing questions. What did she take? Any medications? Any allergies? She ingested something from a vial she was carrying. I said, my voice firm, check her purse. They dumped it out. The contents spilled onto the white tablecloth. Lipstick, wallet, keys, and a small brown bottle. No, Sarah screamed, the sound cutting across the restaurant. The paramedics examined the vial, exchanged a look, and started rattling off medical terms. They loaded her onto a gurney, strapping her down. Brian followed close behind, like wreckage pulled in her wake. The manager approached me cautiously. Mr. Lane, I am so sorry. Her medical bills are her responsibility. I cut him off, my voice low, not mine. I left cash on the table for the uneaten food and walked out into the cool night. My car was still parked where I'd left it, hours ago, in another lifetime. I drove toward the hospital, following the distant sound of sirens. The city lights blurred past. Stoplights changed. Other drivers rushed to wherever they thought they belonged. I drove carefully, obeying every law, as a cold clarity settled into my bones. Like winter, the hospital waiting room smelled like fear, layered over with antiseptic. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, bathing everything in a pale, sick blue. I sat in a plastic chair, hands clasped, while Brian paced like a caged animal. He hadn't spoken a word to me since we arrived. The silence felt appropriate. Around 2 a.m., a doctor appeared. Young, tired, competent. Family for Sarah Torres? We both stood. She's stable, the doctor said, consulting a tablet. Diazepam toxicity, a significant amount. We administered flumacenil, and she's on an IV. She'll make a full recovery, but we're keeping her for observation until tomorrow afternoon. Can we see her? Brian's voice cracked. Briefly. She's sedated. Probably won't remember the visit. The doctor's eyes shifted to me. The substance came from a prescription vial. We will have to report this. Of course, I said calmly. Do whatever is necessary. We followed him through double doors, down hallways that all looked the same. Sarah lay in the bed, surrounded by monitors, an IV in her arm. Her face looked younger, stripped of makeup and manipulation. My daughter, the child I held minutes after she was born, the woman who tried to drug me for my signature. Brian went to her bedside, took her hand. I stayed by the door, An observer, not a participant. After 5 minutes, I left. I found my car in the parking garage and drove home through the empty streets. The city asleep. The mansion looked different when I walked in. Same furniture, same art, different meaning. I walked through rooms that now felt like enemy territory, stopping at Sarah's closed bedroom door. Beyond it, the bed where she had plotted with Brian. The space where they rehearsed my takedown. I continued to my study, closed the door, and stood by the window, watching the dark slowly fade from the sky. Dawn arrived with surgical precision, orange light replacing black, sharp and clear. Sleep seemed irrelevant. Instead, I made coffee, strong, bitter, hot enough to burn. I sat at my desk and started writing in my leather notebook. Not emotions, but facts, dates, conversations, financial transactions, building a timeline. Around 8 a.m., I heard the front door open. Brian, returning, his steps heavy on the stairs. A door closing with controlled force, his anger vibrating through the walls. I went downstairs, poured another coffee, and waited. They came home together around 2 p.m. Sarah walked slowly, discharge papers clutched in her hand, wearing yesterday's clothes. Her eyes were hollow, skin pale. She wouldn't look at me. Brian held her, one hand on her elbow, protection or possession. Impossible to tell. I stood in the archway of the living room. We need to talk. I think we're done talking, Brian snapped. Sighed down. It wasn't a request. Something in my tone made them obey. They sank onto the sofa, a united front against me. I want you out of this house, I said quietly. You have until the end of the month. Sarah's face crumpled. Dad, please. You tried to poison me, to drug me, so I would sign something. What papers were they, Sarah? A power of attorney? A change to the will? Deeds? She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Real ones, finally. Tears for herself, not for what she'd done. Brian leaned forward, his voice hardening. You're overreacting. She made a mistake. She's sorry. She's sorry she failed. I set my coffee cup down. Precisely. There's a difference. You switched the glasses on purpose. His accusation hung in the air. You poisoned your own daughter. I returned the gift. Nothing more. We stared at each other. The lines drawn. The war declared. We're not leaving, Brian said flatly. This is our house. We have rights. No rights, no claims, nothing. Be out by the end of February. I turned toward the stairs. After that, I take legal action. Behind me, Sarah sobbed. Brian's voice rose. We'll see what the lawyers say about elder abuse and mental incompetence. I stopped and turned back. Please, try, give me more evidence. He shut his mouth. I spent the next 3 days watching them, like specimens under glass. They stayed in Sarah's room, voices rising and falling behind the closed door. I stood near air vents, near doorways, anywhere sound traveled. Old house, thin walls, leaking secrets. Thursday morning, I heard Brian on the phone. Competency evaluation, financial manipulation by the daughter. He poisoned her deliberately. Yes, I can document his erratic behavior. They were building their narrative, painting me as the villain, the confused old man, painting them as the concerned family, protecting an elder from himself. I documented it all, writing down snippets of conversation, marking the dates and times. I pulled financial records, bank statements, showing transfers from my accounts to theirs. The purchases made with the credit cards I'd given them. The paper trail of dependency. Patterns emerged. 15 months ago, a $50,000 transfer. For emergency house repairs that never happened. 8 months ago, a $70,000 withdrawal. For an investment opportunity with no documentation. 3 months ago, Brian suddenly had a new car, in his name, paid in cash. My money, their lifestyle, my trust, their exploitation. On February 20th, sitting in my study, I called the law firm of Ryan Blackwood, the lawyer my banker had recommended for complex family matters. The receptionist's voice was efficient, professional. I need a consultation. Regarding possible fraud, financial exploitation of an elder, and attempted harm by family members. I paused, weighing the words. Keyboards clicked on her end. Can you come in on Thursday, 2 p.m.? I'll be there. I hung up. Through the window, I saw Sarah and Brian in the backyard, deep in urgent conversation, planning their next move. So was I. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Timeline of financial manipulation. Evidence log. The first entry started 15 months ago. The cursor blinked on the blank document. Waiting. I typed the header. Timeline of financial manipulation. Evidence log. Under it, I began listing everything I could remember, walking back through 18 months of trust, eroding into exploitation. March 2024. $50,000 transfer for emergency house repairs. I checked my bank records, found the transaction, matched it to my calendar. No contractors visited the house that month. No permits were filed. The house remained exactly the same. First lie. First theft. May 2024. A consultation with a lawyer they had scheduled. I searched my email, found the confirmation. They told me it was estate planning to make things simple for everyone. I now understood what they really wanted. Access, control, signatures on documents I had never authorized. The list grew, each entry a small cut, one I had dismissed at the time. Together, they formed a pattern of premeditated theft. I worked until midnight, then reviewed it all at dawn on February 21st. I printed 3 copies, organized them into labeled folders. I dressed in my best suit, projecting competence, not victimhood. The drive to downtown Miami took 40 minutes. The Brickell Financial District rose up in glass towers, catching the morning sun. I parked in the underground garage, rode the elevator to the 24th floor, carrying my folder like evidence. Which it was. Ryan Blackwood's office was a corner suite overlooking Biscayne Bay. The receptionist, professional, efficient, showed me to a conference room. Ryan walked in precisely at 2. 40s, sharp suit, eyes that assessed without judging. We shook hands. He didn't waste time on small talk. I liked that. I opened my folder and slid the documents across the polished wood. Everything I can document. Timeline, hospital medical report, testimony. He read without interrupting, asking sharp questions, taking notes with a fountain pen. Florida Statute 825, he said finally. Exploitation of an elderly person. It covers attempts to gain control of assets through coercion, manipulation, or incapacitation. He tapped my timeline. This shows a clear pattern. The restaurant incident, the drugging. That's criminal. But we need more documentation of their current behavior. What kind of documentation? Their actions now. Conversations where they discuss strategy. Attempts to manipulate you. You mentioned they're still in your house? I nodded. He continued. I'm recommending a private investigator, Serafina Chen. She's ex-PD, specializes in elder fraud cases. She can set up surveillance, document everything legally. He wrote a name and number on his card and slid it over. Call her. Get proof of what they're doing now, not just what happened before. Then we talk protective trusts, restraining orders, and a possible civil suit. I left feeling something I hadn't in weeks. Validated. This wasn't paranoia. This was self-defense. The next 4 days were careful observation. I wrote everything down. Their whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. The way they watched me. Like predators, studying wounded prey. Brian's hand, always on Sarah's shoulder. Control disguised as affection. Monday morning, February 25th. I drove to Wynwood. Serafina Chen's office was in a modest building. Professional diplomas on the wall. No wasted space. She was in her late 30s. Sharp eyes. No nonsense. Ryan sent your file, she said after I explained. Restaurant poisoning. Financial exploitation. Living with hostile parties. You want surveillance? Whatever documents their behavior. Legally. Cameras. Common areas of your own home. Legal. Living room, kitchen, hallways. Audio and video. Cloud backup. Access from your phone. She gave me a quote. 5,000 retainer plus hourly. I signed the contract without hesitating. Money was worthless compared to the truth. I need access on Tuesday. Can you get them out of the house for a couple of hours? I'll arrange it. Tuesday morning. Over breakfast. I mentioned it casually. I need some things from that specialty market in Coral Gables. I'm giving you a detailed list. Things from a store 30 minutes away. They left at 10 a.m. I texted Serafina. She arrived 15 minutes later with equipment cases. The cameras went into a bookshelf in the living room. A kitchen clock. A hallway smoke detector. Tiny. Invisible. Recording everything. 90 minutes later, the install was done. Everything looks normal, she said. Don't let them know you're watching. The best evidence comes when they feel safe. That night, I sat in my study, headphones on, watching the day's footage, their return from the errand, the conversation in the kitchen as they unpacked the groceries. He's too quiet. Sarah's voice, tight with worry. It's suspicious. We need another angle. Brian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The direct approach didn't work. Time for the indirect approach. I saved the file, dated it, labeled it. Evidence log, entry 1. The following days built my file. February 28th. Brian discussing contingency plans. March 1st. Sarah worried I was acting strange. March 2nd. Them researching lawyers to contest my mental capacity. March 3rd. Brian's search history. Parental incapacity declarations. Every conversation was documented, saved, organized into folders by topic. I watched them plot against me, with the methodical patience of a man building a legal case, brick by brick. Serafina sent weekly reports, their social media activity, online purchases, public record searches, the digital trail of people preparing for war. On March 4th, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. At breakfast, I rubbed my temples. On the night of March 18th, after 3 weeks of evidence, dozens of conversations, hundreds of hours of footage, I picked up my phone and found Ryan Blackwood's number. We strategize tomorrow. It's time to move from documentation to action. The articles appeared on March 5th. I found them scattered on the kitchen counter that morning. Printed pages about cognitive decline, early signs of dementia, the importance of medical evaluation for seniors. On the night of March 18th, after 3 weeks of evidence, dozens of conversations, hundreds of hours of footage, I picked up my phone and found Ryan Blackwood's number. We strategize tomorrow. It's time to move from documentation to action. The articles appeared on March 5th. I found them scattered on the kitchen counter that morning. Printed pages about cognitive decline, early signs of dementia, the importance of medical evaluation for seniors. Sarah stood by the coffee maker, watching my reaction. I found these online, I thought. They might be helpful for understanding what you've been going through. I took the top article, scanned it with practiced confusion. I suppose it couldn't hurt to read. Knowledge is power, Brian added from the doorway, his smile not reaching his eyes. I took the articles to my study, photographed every page, filed as evidence. Psychological manipulation, documented. They were building a narrative. The confused old man who needed intervention, who couldn't be trusted with his own affairs. Over the next 3 days, more articles appeared. Assisted living facilities. The importance of power of attorney. Financial management for cognitive decline. Each one was carefully placed where I would find it. Each one was photographed and filed. On March 8th, the surveillance cameras caught them in the living room, believing they were alone. We need an expert opinion, Brian said. Someone who can evaluate him professionally? A psychologist? Sarah's voice held equal parts hope and guilt. I know someone. Marcus Reynolds. A clinical psychologist, specializes in geriatric cognition. We set up an informal lunch. I introduce them. Marcus makes observations. Will he do it ethically? Will he be objective? If your father is showing symptoms, Marcus documents them. If not, Brian shrugged. Then we know for sure. Money was worthless compared to the truth. I need access on Tuesday. Can you get them out of the house for a couple of hours? I'll arrange it. Tuesday morning. Over breakfast. I mentioned it casually. I need some things from that specialty market in Coral Gables. I'm giving you a detailed list. Things from a store 30 minutes away. They left at 10 a.m. I texted Serafina. She arrived 15 minutes later with equipment cases. The cameras went into a bookshelf in the living room. It's suspicious. We need another angle. Brian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The direct approach didn't work. Time for the indirect approach. I saved the file, dated it, labeled it. Evidence log, entry 1. The following days built my file. February 28th. Brian discussing contingency plans. March 1st. Sarah worried I was acting strange. March 2nd. Them researching lawyers to contest my mental capacity. March 3rd. Brian's search history. If you ever want to talk. Professionally. I'm available. I pocketed the card. Evidence, not a service. The surveillance cameras that night recorded Brian calling Marcus from the living room on speakerphone. So, what did you think? Brian asked. Impatient. He's 63. Some age-related memory variation isn't unusual. Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. I can't make a clinical assessment based on an informal lunch conversation. But, if there are concerns, I could evaluate him, formally. A long pause. With his consent, right? But, Brian, I'm not comfortable being part of this. If you have legitimate concerns for his well-being, there are proper channels. Sure. Just exploring options. After he hung up, Brian's face was dark. We'll find someone else. I saved that recording with particular satisfaction. Even when they tried to corrupt professionals, ethics got in the way. From March 12th to the 17th. But the mic caught everything. He mentioned the will, Sarah said. Hope held in check. That doesn't mean he's changing it for us. Brian's voice was a warning. It could be the opposite, but if he's really confused, if we document he's not competent when he makes the changes, then we challenge them later. Either way, we need more proof of his decline. Real proof, not just observations. They talked for 40 minutes, planning how to document my incompetence. Video. I've been thinking about updating my will, Brian suggested it, given the sale of the business. I want to make sure everything is in order. A dead silence fell. Then Sarah, trying to sound casual. That's responsible, Dad. When are you meeting him? He'll be preparing documents soon to make sure you're taken care of. I left the words hanging in the air. Bait. After dinner, I retreated to my study. The cameras recorded them in the kitchen. Low voices. But the mic caught everything. He mentioned the will, Sarah said. Hope held in check. That doesn't mean he's changing it for us. Brian's voice was a warning. It could be the opposite, but if he's really confused, if we document he's not competent when he makes the changes, then we challenge them later. Either way, we need more proof of his decline. Real proof, not just observations. They talked for 40 minutes, planning how to document my incompetence. Video. On the night of March 18th, after 3 weeks of evidence, dozens of conversations, hundreds of hours of footage, I picked up my phone and found Ryan Blackwood's number. We strategize tomorrow. It's time to move from documentation to action. The articles appeared on March 5th. I found them scattered on the kitchen counter that morning. Printed pages about cognitive decline, early signs of dementia, the importance of medical evaluation for seniors. But the mic caught everything. He mentioned the will, Sarah said. Hope held in check. That doesn't mean he's changing it for us. Brian's voice was a warning. It could be the opposite, but if he's really confused, if we document he's not competent when he makes the changes, then we challenge them later. Either way, we need more proof of his decline. Real proof, not just observations. They talked for 40 minutes, planning how to document my incompetence. Video, documentation, and knowing exactly when to strike. I sent Ryan a text. I have new hard evidence. We need to meet. Urgent. He replied within minutes. Friday, 10 a.m. Bring everything. I put the phone down. Through the study window, the moonlight painted the lawn silver. In the house around me, they were fast asleep, believing they were the architects of my downfall. They had no idea they were building their own. Morning light streamed into the study. March 19th. At 8 a.m. sharp, I picked up the phone and dialed Ryan Blackwood's direct line. He answered on the second ring. Ryan, your text said you had evidence. Weeks of it. Surveillance recordings, conversations, manipulation attempts, all documented. I need to meet today. This afternoon, 2 o'clock. Bring everything. I spent the morning organizing it. I created a folder on my laptop. Legal evidence package. Surveillance files copied. Organized by date and severity. Transcripts printed of their most damaging conversations. Brian, discussing competency challenges. Sarah, worried about my suspicious silence. Both of them, celebrating their progress in controlling my assets. Serafina's weekly reports went into a manila envelope, highlighted and tabbed. I loaded everything onto 2 USB drives. One for Ryan, one for backup. At 2 p.m., I sat across from Ryan in his conference room, the USB drive and documents between us. He watched 3 hours of footage, read every transcript, studied Serafina's behavioral analysis. Finally, he sat back, steepling his fingers. This is extensive. We have multiple legal options, restraining orders, civil suit, criminal charges for the poisoning attempt. He tapped the document. But first, we protect your assets. An irrevocable living trust. How does it work? You transfer your assets into the trust. It becomes a separate legal entity. An independent trustee manages it. You set the conditions for beneficiary access. Once it's signed, it's untouchable. Not even you can change it. He pulled out a legal pad and started sketching the structure. We will make it bulletproof. They can't sue for access. They can't manipulate the administrators. They can't effectively challenge it. How long? A week. If we move now, you'll transfer the bulk of your assets. Keep enough liquid for personal use. We'll set strict conditions for Sarah's eventual access. What conditions? Ryan smiled. A sharp, professional smile. Whatever you want. Age requirements. Financial independence. No pending lawsuits. Any metric that ensures she can't get the money through coercion or fraud. For the next 5 days, we built an impenetrable fortress around my wealth. March 20th. Trust structure designed. 25 million transferred into the trust. 5 million kept liquid for my use. Sarah could access it at age 45, 9 years from now, if she demonstrated 5 years of financial independence and had no civil or criminal cases against her. March 23rd. Meeting with Florida Fiduciary Services. 2 trust officers, professional, impartial, explained their role. They would follow the document to the letter. No family pressure, no manipulation, no exceptions. March 24th. The final signing. Ryan's conference room again, this time with a notary and the trust officers present. The documents were spread across the table, like a treaty ending a war. I signed every page, initialed, dated. The notary stamped each signature. Official. Your assets are secure, Ryan said as I put the copies in my leather folder. She cannot manipulate, coerce, or sue her way into them. The trust is irrevocable. It's done. I drove home with a feeling I hadn't had since February. Power, control, safety. At the house, life continued its strange theater. They didn't know about the trust. Not yet. The cameras recorded their casual talk about the inheritance, their certainty that, in time, my money would be theirs. March 28th. Breakfast. When we inherit, Sarah mentioned, as if it were inevitable. That night, Brian's laptop search history. How to contest a will in Florida. I decided to tell them on April 1st. A fitting date for plans to fall apart. March 31st. I sent them both a text. Family meeting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Living room. Important. Ryan had advised doing this in public, or with witnesses. They could become aggressive. My house, I replied. My rules. The cameras will record everything. April 1st arrived, clear and bright. I set up my laptop, connected to the TV, surveillance footage queued up. At 10 a.m., they walked into the living room, a nervous energy in the air. I stood. They sat. The sofa was lower than me, establishing hierarchy. I've made some decisions about my estate. I brought up the trust document on the screen. I have created an irrevocable living trust. Their focus sharpened. I explained it, systematically. 25 million transferred, independent trustee, the conditions for access, age 45, financial independence, no pending litigation. I watched their faces as understanding dawned. What? Sarah's voice cracked. You're cutting me out? I'm protecting my assets. From manipulation. Brian shot up from the sofa. This is because of the restaurant? One mistake, and you. One mistake. I hit play on the remote. Their own voices filled the room. Surveillance footage. Them. Discussing my competency. Planning to document my decline. Celebrating their progress. You spied on us? Sarah was crying now. Your own daughter? I protected myself from the people who tried to drug me for legal papers. We're suing. Brian stepped forward. His aggression barely concealed. We'll challenge this. You can't. It's irrevocable. It's done. Legally bulletproof. I met his eyes. Try to challenge it. Waste your money on lawyers. The law is clear. We've lived here for 5 years. We have rights. You have no rights to my money. You never did. Brian stormed out. Sarah followed him, sobbing. I went back to my study, reviewed the camera footage of the confrontation I had just recorded, saved it, dated it, labeled it, evidence of their reaction. Their rage confirmed their guilt. The next week, the house became a battleground. Slammed doors, hostile silence. I overheard calls to lawyers, all saying the same thing. The trust was solid, unbreakable. April 7th, Sarah tried to reconcile. She knocked on my study door. Tears ready. Dad, we can fix this. I'm your daughter. My daughter would never have tried to poison me. It was a mistake. Please, leave my study. She left. I sat there, alone, staring at the wall, knowing what came next. The trust protected my money. Now, I needed my house back. I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words. Get them out. That evening I called a real estate agent, Catherine Wells, recommended by my banker for discretion and speed. I want to sell my house. When can we list it? I can see it tomorrow morning. If it's as you describe, we can list this weekend. She arrived on April 8th. Tape measure. Professional appraisal. She walked through the rooms, where my daughter and son-in-law were still living, assessing the market value of the house they were borrowing. A beautiful property. I can list it for $7 million. This market is fast, but the property must be empty for showings. It will be. The listing went live on April 10th. First showing scheduled for April 12th. I notified Sarah and Brian via text. Showings on Friday. You will need to be gone for 3 hours. Brian texted back. You're selling the house? Yes. No reply. They left Friday morning. When they returned, they found business cards from potential buyers on the kitchen counter. Their faces. The realization that I was dismantling their entire life. April 15th. I had Ryan draft the eviction notice. Formal, legal, final, 60 days to vacate. I served it to them that night, as they sat in the living room, their borrowed living room. Money was worthless compared to the truth. I need access on Tuesday. Can you get them out of the house for a couple of hours? I'll arrange it. Tuesday morning. Over breakfast. I mentioned it casually. I need some things from that specialty market in Coral Gables. I'm giving you a detailed list. things from a store 30 minutes away. They left at 10 a.m. I texted Serafina. She arrived 15 minutes later with equipment cases. The cameras went into a bookshelf in the living room. Ryan filed the eviction lawsuit on April 20th. Court date set for May 10th. 3 weeks. In the meantime, I leased an apartment downtown. Month to month. Waterfront. Quiet. A clean space. No bad memories. I moved out on April 28th. The house had become hostile territory. I stayed in the apartment, returning only for essentials. On each visit, the cameras caught their desperation. Sarah crying, Brian furious, both of them calling lawyers who had no solutions. May 10th, Miami-Dade Courthouse, 3rd floor. Eviction hearing. Ryan and I sat at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Sarah, Brian, and their lawyer. Young, in over his head, knowing he had no case. Judge Martinez took the bench. A man in his 50s. No nonsense. Experienced in seeing people try to avoid consequences. Their lawyer stood. Your Honor, my clients have lived in this property for 5 years. Under what agreement? Judge Martinez cut in. Family. The plaintiff is Mrs. Torres's father. That is not a lease. Do they pay rent? No, but is there a written lease agreement? No, Your Honor. Then they are guests, with no contract. Mr. Lane has served the appropriate 60-day notice. He looked at Ryan. Yes, Your Honor. Served on April 15th. They have until June 15th to vacate. Judge Martinez reviewed the documents. I see no legal standing to stop this eviction. The plaintiff is the homeowner. The defendants have no lease. No rental agreement. The notice was proper. He looked at Sarah and Brian. You have until June 15th. After that date, law enforcement can be involved. Motion granted. The gavel cracked. Final. In the hallway, Brian confronted me, his voice low and threatening. You'll regret this. You're destroying your own family. I'm removing the people who poisoned me. We'll make you pay. With what money? I walked away, leaving him sputtering in the hall. The next 5 weeks were a tense standoff. I stayed in my apartment. They stayed in the house, slowly packing, desperately looking for rental properties they couldn't afford without me. The cameras recorded the endless arguments, Sarah's breakdowns, Brian's rage at his complete defeat. June 14th. I got the confirmation. The buyer for the house had completed the inspection. The sale was approved to close in August, pending possession. June 15th. Moving day. Ryan filed the eviction lawsuit on April 20th. Court date set for May 10th. 3 weeks. In the meantime, I leased an apartment downtown. Month to month. Waterfront. Quiet. A clean space. No bad memories. I moved out on April 28th. The house had become hostile territory. I stayed in the apartment, returning only for essentials. On each visit, the cameras caught their desperation. Sarah crying, Brian furious, both of them calling lawyers who had no solutions. May 10th. The plaintiff is Mrs. Torres's father. That is not a lease. Do they pay rent? No, but is there a written lease agreement? No, Your Honor. Then they are guests, with no contract. Mr. Lane has served the appropriate 60-day notice. He looked at Ryan. Yes, Your Honor. Served on April 15th. They have until June 15th to vacate. Judge Martinez reviewed the documents. I see no legal standing to stop this eviction. The plaintiff is the homeowner. The defendants have no lease. Parental incapacity declarations. Every conversation was documented, saved, organized into folders by topic. I watched them plot against me, with the methodical patience of a man building a legal case, brick by brick. Serafina sent weekly reports, their social media activity, online purchases, public record searches, the digital trail of people preparing for war. On March 4th, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. At breakfast, I rubbed my temples. The next 5 weeks were a tense standoff. I stayed in my apartment. They stayed in the house, slowly packing, desperately looking for rental properties they couldn't afford without me. The cameras recorded the endless arguments, Sarah's breakdowns, Brian's rage at his complete defeat. June 14th. I got the confirmation. The buyer for the house had completed the inspection. The sale was approved to close in August, pending possession. June 15th. Moving day. Organized it in an expanding folder with labeled tabs. Each item told a piece of the story. Together, they were undeniable. Monday morning, June 16th. I met Ryan at his office. He spread the evidence across the conference table. Civil suit. Florida Statute 825 to 103, Ryan said, taking notes. Exploitation of an elder. Financial manipulation. Attempted drugging. Infliction of emotional distress. Fraud. Conspiracy. Seeking $500,000 in damages plus costs. This isn't about the money, I said. I know. It's about the public record, documenting what they did. He looked up from his notes. You want consequences. Exactly. We filed the lawsuit on June 17th. Sarah and Brian were served notice at their new apartment, a small 2-bedroom, far from Coral Gables. The process server reported they had barely unpacked. Their lawyer contacted Ryan within days, voice strained over the speakerphone. My clients can't afford this. They're already ruined. They should have thought of that before they tried to drug and defraud their benefactor, Ryan replied, cold. Discovery began. Ryan subpoenaed their financial records. The bank statements told the truth. No savings, living on maxed-out credit cards, drowning in debt created by their lifestyle expectations. June 28th. The settlement offer came. I met Ryan in his office to review it. A $50,000 payment plan. A private admission of guilt. No trial. It's reasonable, Ryan said, cautiously. They clearly can't pay a full judgment, but the settlement would be confidential. No public record. I pushed the papers back across his desk. No, I want this public. I want the court files. Forever. A trial is a risk. A judge might award less. I don't care about the money, I care about the record. I met his eyes. They tried to destroy me. I wanted officially documented that they were wrong, and I was right. Ryan nodded. Slowly. This isn't about the money, I said. I know. It's about the public record, documenting what they did. He looked up from his notes. You want consequences. Exactly. We filed the lawsuit on June 17th. Sarah and Brian were served notice at their new apartment, a small 2-bedroom, far from Coral Gables. The process server reported they had barely unpacked. Their lawyer contacted Ryan within days, voice strained over the speakerphone. My clients can't afford this. Arrived at the Miami-Dade County Courthouse early. Judge Catherine Morrison was presiding. 50s. Known for her fairness and her tough sentences. Ryan had recommended a bench trial, not a jury. Judges understand elder law better than the public. Opening statements. Ryan laid out the timeline, the summary of evidence, with meticulous precision. Their lawyer, young, outmatched, argued that a family misunderstanding had been blown out of proportion. Kevin testified first. He described the restaurant incident with complete conviction. I saw Mrs. Torres pour something from a small vial into Mr. Lane's wine glass while he was away from the table. A clear liquid, a deliberate action. Their lawyer tried to cross-examine. Couldn't you have been mistaken? No, I know what I saw. I couldn't stay silent. The hospital doctor explained the diazepam toxicology results, the dosage, the dangers. Serafina presented the surveillance methodology, the chain of custody, the authentication of the recordings. Day 2, July 29th. The surveillance video played on the courtroom monitor, their own voices, filling the space, discussing my competency issues, planning the Marcus consultation, celebrating their progress toward the inheritance. Brian, he's 63. He's not sharp anymore. Sarah's voice. We deserve this money. I watched Judge Morrison taking notes. It's reasonable, Ryan said, cautiously. They clearly can't pay a full judgment, but the settlement would be confidential. No public record. I pushed the papers back across his desk. No, I want this public. I want the court files. Forever. A trial is a risk. A judge might award less. I don't care about the money, I care about the record. I met his eyes. They tried to destroy me. I wanted officially documented that they were wrong, and I was right. Ryan nodded. Slowly. The trust, the eviction. I presented the evidence. One piece at a time. Cross-examination was aggressive. Aren't you just being vengeful, Mr. Lane? I am seeking accountability. There is a difference. Judge Morrison asked her own question. Why pursue a civil case after the trust and the eviction? I looked at her. Because what they did was wrong. It needs to be in the public record, for my protection, as a precedent, for the truth. July 30th. Closing arguments. Ryan. This is a textbook case of elder exploitation, attempted drugging, financial manipulation, psychological coercion. The evidence is overwhelming. Their lawyer. A family conflict. Poor judgment. Yes, but not exploitation. Judge Morrison closed her notebook. I will issue a written ruling in 2 weeks. I walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon heat. I had done my part. I told the truth. Publicly, I presented the evidence. Now, justice would decide if the truth mattered. 2 weeks of waiting. I returned to my temporary apartment, watched the sunset over Biscayne Bay, and waited. August 15th. The sunrise filtered over the ocean, in front of my balcony. Coffee steamed in my hand. Bitter, familiar. 2 weeks after the trial ended. The phone rang at 9 a.m. sharp. Ryan. We have the verdict. I sat down, the view of the ocean stretching out. Infinite. And the judge ruled in your favor. A total victory. Found clear and convincing evidence of elder exploitation, attempted financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Judgment for $350,000 in damages, plus court costs. $75,000 in punitive damages. $425,000 total. The number felt abstract. There's more, Ryan continued. A permanent restraining order. They are prohibited from contacting you, directly or indirectly. No calls, no letters, no third-party communication. Violation ma contempt, charge. And the payment? They have nothing. The court has ordered a payment plan, garnishment of future wages, until the debt is paid. It could take years, but the judgment is public record, a permanent documentation of what they tried to do. That was what I wanted. Not the money, the documentation, the validation, the public record, that I was not paranoid, I was not cruel, I was attacked, and I had every right to defend myself. Thank you, Ryan, for everything. You did the work. I just made it legal. After I hung up, I sat and watched the morning. The written opinion arrived by email an hour later. I read every page. Judge Morrison wrote, "The evidence demonstrates a premeditated exploitation of an elder by those in positions of trust. The incident at the restaurant, attempting to drug him, constitutes a crime in itself. The subsequent surveillance recordings reveal ongoing manipulation. This court finds the defendant's actions to be reprehensible and deserving of maximum civil penalties. Répréhensible, maximum penalties. Public record." I printed the opinion and filed it away. One last document in a case that was now closed. August 16th. I closed on the Coral Gables house. Sold to a young family for $2.75 million. They would never know what happened within those walls. They would fill it with different memories, different lives. That same day I bought a condo, downtown, 10th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, views of the ocean to the horizon, $850,000, cash, from the house sale. Modern, clean, no history. I moved in on August 18th. Furniture arrived. Simple, nothing excessive. The space felt like breathing after being underwater. August 20th. A final meeting with Serafina at her Wynwood office. Case closed, she said, handing me a USB drive. Ryan, This is a textbook case of elder exploitation, attempted drugging, financial manipulation, psychological coercion. The evidence is overwhelming. Their lawyer, a family conflict, poor judgment, yes, but not exploitation. Judge Morrison closed her notebook. I will issue a written ruling in 2 weeks. I walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon heat. I had done my part. I told the truth. Publicly, I presented the evidence. Now, violation ma contempt charge. And the payment? They have nothing. The court has ordered a payment plan, garnishment of future wages, until the debt is paid. It could take years, but the judgment is public record, a permanent documentation of what they tried to do. That was what I wanted. Not the money, the documentation, the validation, the public record, that I was not paranoid, I was not cruel, I was attacked, and I had every right to defend myself. Thank you, Ryan, all surveillance recordings, reports, and documentation, for your records. Thank you for everything. You made it easy. They were predictable. She stood, held out her hand. Take care of yourself, Mr. Lane. We shook. Business concluded. August 22nd. I was sitting on my new balcony, phone in my hand. I searched for Sarah's contact. My finger hovered over the screen. Delete contact. A confirmation box appeared. I pressed yes. Her name vanished. Brian's next. With the trust. I had evicted them from my house. I had held them accountable with a civil judgment. I had won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like emerging from dark water and realizing I was still breathing. My daughter had tried to poison me. That truth was heavy, unchangeable, but I refused to be a victim. I refused to let my trust make me vulnerable. The ocean stretched out, infinite, somewhere in the city behind me. Sarah and Brian were living with the consequences. A court debt, following them for years. A public record, affecting job applications, background checks, a restraining order, preventing them from ever seeking reconciliation on their own terms. I didn't hate them. Hate required energy. I had spent all my energy on documentation, preparation, and legal battles. Now, all I had was peace. The sun touched the horizon. The city lights began to sparkle. My coffee was cold, but I didn't move. I just stood there, watching the cycle of nature continue. I had built an empire from nothing. I sold it for $30 million. I protected $25 million in an unbreakable trust. I lost a daughter, but I saved myself. I found justice in the courts and peace in the separation. Some stories end with family reunions and forgiveness. This one ended with distance, documentation, and the relief of being safe. The sun dipped below the ocean. I finished my cold coffee. Without a look back, I walked into the empty house. The echo of footsteps on the hardwood floors. No furniture. No trace of them. No trace of the poison in the air. Room by room, I walked the reclaimed space. Marks on the walls where pictures used to hang. Indentations in the carpet from furniture. The house felt like an empty shell, tainted by what happened in it. But finally, empty. My phone buzzed. Ryan, eviction complete, set the mug on the balcony railing and watched the stars appear. Tomorrow, I'd call my old partner about that consulting opportunity. Next week, I'd have lunch with friends. In time, I would travel and fill my days with something other than litigation. But tonight, I just stood here, free, protected, alone, but not lonely. The ocean whispered against the shore far below. The city hummed. Life went on, offering new days to those who survived the old battles.